fit in a question or two, if anybody would like to ask a question of any of our three speakers. Must be somebody out there. Remember there was Helen from Loughborough, there was Katherine from the National Library as well. That was Dawn.
Hi, it's Conul from WIT. I just want to commend all the speakers and the panel. Just fantastic range of different research focus and so many ideas and really a lot of best practice. I think that would be of value. I suppose my one question is this, and it kind of ties into this whole idea of the commercialization of data and of information that would perceive as being should be publicly available. So the interest in genealogy websites has gone through the roof in Ireland, but yet you have a couple of really strong heavy hitters in the form of Find My Past and Ancestry.co.uk, and I suppose there's a caveat there in the fact that a lot of people allow access to resources and don't realise that once they've allowed these companies to digitise the resources, that suddenly they have the copyright on them. That's just a minor point. But I suppose my question is this, is that things we do have control over is the 1926 census and the continual restriction of access. So there's 100 years restriction on access to this resource. In terms of members of the panel, in terms of data protection, and in terms of making resources available, do they feel that 100 years is too much on a resource that is of potential value to the country, to its understanding, so in the 10 years post 16, that we can get a greater sense of what Ireland was like at the time? Thanks.
Thanks very much, Kieran. Can I ask our three speakers to answer that one briefly, please? Because I'm just conscious we have another session. So.
Yeah, I might say something on that. I was at a funeral last week of a woman who was 106, which is an amazing age to get to. But in that context, it made me think about that 100-year rule. And it is one of those areas, that 1926 census, which is really complex because you're trying to balance those two competing requirements, that there are still people around for whom the content of the 100 years ago census is live information. So I think what I'd like to see happen over the next couple of years is that we would have a conversation around that and around quite a number of other complex issues that are going to come up. It came up in Kate's paper earlier, for anyone who heard it, is we would, at a state level, engage in conversation that would help us to address some of those questions: availability of data that affects people's memories in a recent way. It's going to come up around the Civil War and all of the activity that happened there. So I think this is a good time to start thinking about it. And as is obvious from my answer, I don't actually have an answer myself.
Very good. Thanks, Katherine. Do you want to add very briefly to that?
I think you really have to weigh in the potential for damage versus the potential for good is what it comes at. And I think the Rwandan genocide was only in 1994, so that's actually very recent. And obviously you actually have people living next door to people who killed their brothers or sisters. And it's very public and it's very well known. So it's very different to United Kingdom, Europe. But we're in a very different culture as well. But it is looking at, well, actually, would that cause damage to have that data released? And I think there's a lot of data that could be released, which is being kept behind closed doors due to 100 years. But there is other stuff that is reasonable to have kept there, and it is who gets to decide what is released and not. But just choosing a set amount of time, maybe time to revise that and look at maybe, well, actually, what is the sensitive data there and how does it... But I think it's moving on to, well, if we're doing another census, we actually look at that in the beginning of the census, of actually this amount of data will be made publicly available within 5 years, 10 years, etc. immediately. This amount won't, and being more sensible in how we collect that data in the first instance.
Thanks very much, Dawn. Are we okay? Good? Because I actually think so. I don't mean good in the sense just... And congratulations to Kieran for asking such a challenging question late in the day as well. Listen, I'd like to, because I'm conscious we have another session, but huge thanks to all of our speakers and also to our timekeeper, Liz Dorban. The speakers were very stimulating and complemented each other beautifully, I think, so well done to you all.
you.